Everyone in America agrees that the immigration system is broken, but that's about the only thing they agree on. When it comes to how to fix it, or even what reform means, opinions differ widely. We'll talk about the real issues and the range of political opinions surrounding them next on The Line. This is On the Line, and I'm Aisha Tanzim. The debate over immigration reform in the U.S. is heating up, even as lawmakers enjoy their 5-week recess. The Senate passed a comprehensive immigration reform bill back in June that includes a pathway to citizenship for the nation's 11 million undocumented workers. The Republicans in the House have already shown their reservations. To talk about the issues surrounding this debate, we have Lia Parada, the legislative director at America's Voice, and Dr. Bryan Roberts, a senior economist at Econometrica and a former assistant director at the Department of Homeland Security. Welcome to On the Line. I'm going to ask you both to describe in broad brushstrokes, because this is a very nuanced debate, what are the real issues? What are people who are considered pro-immigration reform thinking? What are people who are considered anti-immigration reform, which I think may not be an accurate term, but people who want to restrict immigration and people who want to liberalize it, starting with you, Lia?
I think that there's a changing contrast of what those definitions are at the moment. We're seeing that change most vividly through House Republicans, who are now deciding where they want to stand on this issue. Do they want to put 11 million people on a path to citizenship? Or to the complete opposite and contrary, do they want to deport 11 million people? What does that mean for our nation? What does that mean for them politically? Those are very tough questions for them to answer at this moment, but something that they are grappling with, and we're seeing changing almost daily.
I would add to that there is a historical context here. The U.S. has struggled with the management of immigration, and in particular large unauthorized immigration flows, since the late 1940s. And so when we say the immigration system is broken, people have different understandings of what being broken means. People have different understandings of what the goals of the immigration should be. Should it be to facilitate inflows of immigrants? Should it be to restrict to very low levels? And in the background of the current debate is the experience that we had in 1986 with the last really major comprehensive immigration reform that was passed. The 1986 bill made a lot of promises in terms of enforcement and managing future unauthorized immigration flows. It also carried out a big legalization program. But over the decade that ensued after it was passed, we had the largest illegal immigration flows in the country's history. So people are concerned that we find durable solutions.
Okay, and just simplifying matters a little further, which I know might irritate some academics and scholars, but for a broad international audience, the debate that's going on one side is the argument that the borders need to be secured, and on the other side, there's a large percent of the population and a lot of Democrats who are saying the 11 million undocumented workers need to be legalized and eventually made citizens of the country. And that's oversimplification. Now, Lia, what I want to ask you is, 11 million people, as he suggests, there was a last wave of legalizing people, and that increased illegal immigration. And the fear is that this will happen again if these people are also legalized and eventually made citizens.
Many people talk about the shortcomings of the 1986 immigration law, but many of them failed to mention that the legal immigration bill that passed did not seek to legalize the full 6 million undocumented immigrants that were here at the time, or I believe it was 3 million, but it only legalized half the population, and as a public policy goal, their aim was only half, and there were no reforms to future legal immigration system, whereas in the Senate bill that passed, there is a robust future legal immigration program that is coordinated with the needs of our economy, our unemployment rate, and our different industrial sectors to set the future legal immigration programs, as well as taking into account family ties. There's many people who are here and have relatives in other parts of the world. And to the extent that we can provide a modern, robust legal immigration process, which is more addressed in the Senate immigration bill that recently passed than was in 1986, we can begin to address all those different issues that led to the 86 bill not being as successful in bringing us back decades later to addressing this issue once again.
And Dr. Roberts, the flip side of this argument is that unemployment rate in U.S. is very high, and people are saying when illegal immigrants come here, they compete for jobs that Americans could and should have. Mm-hmm. So, and particularly of importance are people who are not high-skilled, who are low-skilled, jobs that people say Americans can fill. And you've also done some work on that. Can you expand on some of your work and your findings?
Sure. Well, the evidence over the past 100 years about flows of immigrants from Mexico and Central America to the U.S. pretty conclusively shows that these flows move with the American business cycle. So as we enter an economic boom time, these flows will pick up, whether they're legal or illegal. And when we have recessions, these flows will fall. And in fact, illegal immigration didn't begin in a large scale until World War II broke out, and there was a huge demand for migrant workers from Mexico. We've just witnessed the Great Recession, and that has clearly had a major impact on the decision of many people in Mexico and Central America to migrate illegally to the U.S. So the evidence shows that, you know, these flows move with the U.S. business cycle independently of what's happening with enforcement.
And also the Mexican economy is doing well, so we've seen immigration drop a little bit. Has it been significant, Lia?
Net apprehensions at the border are nearly at zero, and we are seeing the economic reality in Mexico get better. And also, we're seeing less people migrating to the United States, but what we have seen through enforcement and our inflexibility in our immigration laws is when someone comes here, they don't return back to their country, and we need to return to that fluidity in our process, as was noted in the Senate immigration bill that passed.
Okay, now before we move forward, I want to welcome another guest who's just joined us, and we are joined by Charles Spies, who's the founder of Republicans for Immigration Reform. Mr. Spies, welcome to On the Line.
Thank you.
Now, I want to ask you, a lot of Republicans in the House are very reluctant about the bill that's passed in the Senate. Can you explain what are some of the things that are worrying to them?
Well, the Senate bill is such a large bill that it's hard to know exactly how the provisions are going to be enforced. And that's why the House Republicans are taking a methodical approach and going to examine components of immigration reform and move forward on a step-by-step basis, addressing bills sequentially, but not having this massive, overwhelming bill that may have provisions that, frankly, President Obama may just choose not to enforce.
So let's move beyond enforcement and let's move into specifics, because you're talking about bills and a lot of people may not know what the bill is and what the provisions are. So the biggest issue that we mentioned at the beginning, that was either legalizing the 11 million undocumented workers or giving them citizenship. What's the problem with that, people who've been living here for 20, 30 years?
Well, I think legalizing is something, especially a certain subsect of the people that have been living in the United States, is something that's necessary, and for economic growth, we're going to have to do. You added another component in citizenship, and there's much less consensus around whether citizenship makes sense or is necessary. As I'm sure you're aware, back in 1986, under President Reagan, when they had immigration reform and it was extremely easy to get a green card, under 50% of the people that could have gotten citizenship even tried to get citizenship. And the reason for that is that a lot of these immigrants just want the ability to stay in the United States, have a job, be part of the system, and go home and visit their families and perhaps take money home to their families and come back to the United States. All of those economic arguments don't require citizenship. They just require a new system, fixing our current broken system so that workers can stay in the United States.
Okay, so you said that all of those incentives do not require citizenship. When we come back, we will find out why citizenship is required or even demanded by some of these people, but stay with us for now.
Voice of America. 1,500 hours of news and information.
Educational and cultural programming to more than 134 million people
worldwide each week.
Listen to us on radio.
Watch us on television.
Follow us on Facebook or Twitter.
And through your mobile device.
VOA.
We're dynamic
and consistent
in bringing you the most reliable information in 43 languages.
Tune in.
Tune in.
Welcome back to On the Line. I'm Aisha Tanzim. We are talking about immigration reform in the U.S., particularly in the context of possible upcoming legislation. Our guests for this topic are Lia Parada, the Legislative Director at America's Voice, Dr. Bryan Roberts, a Senior Economist at Econometrica, also former Assistant Director at the Department of Homeland Security, and also joining us is Charles Spies, the founder of Republicans for Immigration Reform. Welcome back. Ms. Parada, giving people legal status, not necessarily citizenship, what's wrong with that?
Well, it goes against who we are as Americans. As a matter of public policy, as legislators, our elected officials, our members of Congress, should not be enacting legislation that will relegate millions of people to a second-class status. No one is forcing anyone to go through the entire process to become a citizen. But as legislators, they should rise above this and really address this issue and fix the problem and provide people the opportunity to get on an earned path to citizenship. It is not easy by any means, and many people will be deterred because there are so many costs associated. For a family of 4, imagine paying your immigration lawyer plus your thousands of dollars worth of fees to go through the process. It's at least a decade to get a green card under every proposal that I've seen. 87% of Americans support a path to citizenship. I don't understand why legislators would go contrary to that.
Dr. Bryan, what do you add to that? Economically, does it make sense to have them just as legal residents of the country or as citizens?
Well, I would think that first and foremost, the priority of those currently living in the U.S. in unauthorized status would be to be made legal so that they could have legal status and work legally. I think we should keep in mind becoming a citizen is a voluntary choice. You can live as an immigrant in the U.S. for your entire life as a legal permanent resident without ever becoming a citizen or going through the process called naturalization. To go through naturalization does involve cost. It involves monetary cost. There's a fee involved.
Back taxes, as the proposal suggests.
Back taxes, but it also involves being able to pass the citizenship test, which is administered in English. So there are monetary and non-monetary costs involved in making that voluntary choice. I don't think we have a great deal of evidence on what the preferences of those who are currently unauthorized in the U.S. are with respect to potentially naturalizing in the future. As Mr. Spies pointed out, the evidence of people who were legalized under the 1986 Act, roughly about half of them chose to naturalize in subsequent decades.
Mr. Spies, as Ms. Parada pointed out, it's very difficult to become a naturalized citizen. It involves at least a decade, thousands of dollars, and these people, a lot of them have been living here for 20, 30 years. This is their home. Why shouldn't they be given the chance to enjoy citizenship?
I think we all can agree that our system right now is broken. And so the question then is, what can we pass to improve our current system? And frankly, it's a national security issue too. Get people into the system, have criminal background checks performed, and perhaps get them to be tax-paying citizens and give them a sense of security so that they can live in the country. None of this requires citizenship. Anybody who's arguing that citizenship is the lodestar of immigration reform is frankly playing politics. There's no reason that needs to be the focus.
Wouldn't you say, though, that if you do not give a lot of these people an opportunity to become citizens, that they will be relegated to a second-class citizen status?
I think we can solve so many of the issues with our currently broken immigration system just by getting a legalization program in place and allowing people to become part of the system and not have to worry about going home to visit their families or worry about being deported, that it's a false choice to focus the whole issue on citizenship, something even under the large Senate bill that doesn't happen for at least 13 years. So you're creating a false sense of hope by focusing just on citizenship when there's a much better chance of fixing our broken system if we focus on the different parts of the problem and get some legislation passed in the near term.
Now, Ms. Parada, he said that you can live here, you can work here, you can travel back and forth without being a citizen. And there's also another possibility on the table, which is known as the KIDS Act. You make citizens the children who were brought here when they were very young, but not necessarily the parents who came here when they were older.
Well, I want to address a comment that Mr. Spies made earlier. Playing politics is coming short of solving the problem. That is playing politics. And I think that there's a more optimistic view of what is happening in Congress at this moment. I don't speak for Republicans in the House, but we're watching very closely what they're saying. And so far, 22 House Republicans have said that they support a path to citizenship. Just this last week, through the town halls that happened, Congressman Reichert, Schock, and Webster, all representing different states across the nation, have come out in favor of path to citizenship. And the reality is, when you count the numbers of how many you need to pass a vote with the path to citizenship in the House, you only need 30 Republicans, and we're only a third of the way through August, and we have 22 on board. So I would like to say to Mr. Spies, we're in a much better posture at this time, and I believe we can solve this problem and include the opportunity for people to get to a path to citizenship. As for the KIDS Act, the Dreamers themselves has said that they firmly oppose this bill because they will not accept a solution that doesn't include their families, including the other 4 bills that have passed the House Judiciary Committee, attempting to get to fixing the problem. Every constituency that they are designed to address has firmly opposed it because they prefer the provisions in the Senate bill.
Mr. Spies, are Republicans worried because, as Ms. Parada pointed out, they're very close to getting the votes they need in the House?
I don't think that would make Republicans worried. I think she made a great point that even conservative Republicans are coming together and understanding that that our current system is broken and we need to have some sort of reform. And you referenced the KID Act, which Majority Leader Cantor is pushing along with Chairman Goodlatte. And that would be a common ground we could look at, where children who came to the country through no fault of their own and know nothing other than being in the United States, they would be given citizenship, and that makes sense. And that's something that I think most Republicans will end up agreeing with. It's when you then hear that that's not enough, that we've got to go with the Obama administration's executive order, which they passed right before the election in an effort to play crass politics. That's unfortunate. I think we should look back to what Republicans are doing with a sequential process that allows a debate about the different parts of comprehensive reform and a thoughtful dialogue. And I fervently hope we do get something passed out of the House that's well thought out and is better than this current broken system we have.
Okay, now since we're coming towards the end of the program, Dr. Roberts, I want to ask you, a lot of emphasis on border security, particularly by the House and the Republicans. The past border security measures, have they made sense economically and otherwise?
You mean the enforcement buildups?
The enforcement programs, the border fence.
So the first issue involved there is what impact have the previous enforcement buildups had, and this is something that the government should have provided better evidence on, particularly in the past few months. There should have been an effort to show convincingly what these impacts have been. The evidence that we do have shows that there was a real impact of the border buildup in the late 2000s, and that the fall in measured illegal immigration from Mexico to the U.S., about 1/3 of that fall was due to the Great Recession, 1/3 was due to improvements in the Mexican economy, and 1/3 due to the border buildup. Then there's the broader question, well, how should we be conducting enforcement? Should we be focusing exclusively on border enforcement? Should we be expanding enforcement programs in the interior? The Senate bill addresses both. I think many analysts who look at these issues would say that we really need a combination of tougher enforcement at the border, but perhaps even more importantly, expansion of programs like E-Verify. And then there's the even broader question, well, are there approaches that involve legal immigrant pathways or legal temporary worker pathways that could help in immigration management? I think history shows conclusively that a legal approach is inherently needed in order to manage illegal immigration inflows. And if I could just add, I think the three of us at this discussion at this table shows a consensus on that. I think we are seeing the two sides involved in this debate groping their way towards a consensus.
And we will find out when the House comes back, and we might be inviting you guys back again to talk about this issue. We'll see how the situation develops. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today, though. I want to thank our guest, Lia Parada, the Legislative Director at America's Voice, Dr. Bryan Roberts, a senior economist at Econometrica and a former assistant director at the Department of Homeland Security, and Charles Spies, the founder of Republicans for Immigration Reform. And thank you for joining us. Please send us your questions or comments or watch our past shows on our website, voanews.com/ontheline. We look forward to hearing from you and hope you'll join us again next week for another episode of On the Line.
Scientists studying the sun face a challenge: bad weather.
The corona ranges from 1 to a few million degrees Kelvin.
Meaning,
we can't send spacecraft this close to the sun and actually measure the field at known locations.
So instead, astrophysicists like Cooper Downs enlist extraterrestrial helpers.
Comets serve as sort of natural celestial explorers for us.
Unfortunately, most of the sun-grazing comets, as they're called,
are observed on one side coming in, and then they're not observed again.
Until Comet Lovejoy in 2011.
Lovejoy came within 140,000 kilometers of the solar surface, and then re-emerged.
But it was really the tail that was the most telling.
We noticed right away that the motion of the tail seemed to wiggle back and forth.
See the tail shake? That wiggle is caused by the sun's magnetic field. The charged particles coming off the comet are moved around by the magnetic field lines they're encountering.
Basically, this is indicating the local direction of the magnetic field in the corona. And measuring the magnetic field of the corona is actually notoriously difficult. We see plasma emission, and that can be very obvious when we look at structures like coronal loops. But what researchers really want to understand is the full magnetic field structure of the sun, and in particular at the corona low down.
Downs is trying to map the magnetic field through this computer model. The orange and blue lines represent predicted magnetic field lines, and the pink line is the comet's path.
So this is what the comet saw, and that sort of shows you what the local magnetic field looked like.
Then Downs and colleagues tested the model against the observed wiggles to evaluate and refine it. Getting a good model has implications at home too, by the way, because the magnetic field is involved in space weather, which affects us here on Earth.
It can cause currents to be induced along power lines and disturb satellites and communication grids.
The idea is that understanding the sun better could help with space weather forecasting. But getting that up-close and personal sun survey from one of these celestial explorers just requires good luck.
Well, it's sort of, you take what you can get, and we're getting a very big comet coming in the end of November.
That's Comet Ison, and it's expected to graze the sun, too.
We're excited about that for the same reason that we were about Lovejoy.
Because it may shine some light on the star that our lives revolve around. Stay tuned for Science Friday. I'm Flora Lichtman.
Detecting lung cancer faster than ever before. The story next on Discoveries and Breakthroughs. Raymond Tolley got the one phone call no one ever wants to hear.
We got the call that it was cancer, lung cancer.
He was devastated.
That day, my whole life changed.
Raymond caught his lung cancer early, increasing his chances of survival. Now, radiologists are using a new technology called on-guard chest X-ray to spot lung cancer earlier and save more lives.
The radiologist will have a look. The computer software, which is the on-guard, will take another look and will point out by means of circles where there are areas of suspicion.
The technology uses pattern recognition to look for lung cancer tumors on a traditional X-ray image. Computer software scans the image for any abnormal patterns, which may indicate a possible tumor, and then clearly marks areas for doctors. Studies show this technology detects up to 50% of lung cancers that were missed in initial images.
If you detect it early, when it's still very limited and hasn't spread, the survival rate is probably in the 70 to 80% rate. That's a huge difference.
Spotting lung cancer is difficult because the ribs and blood vessels can be in the way when viewing a chest X-ray. The new technology takes the guesswork out of finding cancer.
Early detection for me is probably what saved my life.
I'm Alex Kane reporting.